Welcome to Innovation Insider, the series unlocking industry expertise to uplift innovation capability. I'm thrilled to introduce Jodie Granger to our latest edition. Jodie is the founder and CEO of Healthcare Innovated. We first connected earlier this year through the innovation community and quickly found a shared passion for healthcare innovation. We've recently collaborated on an educational piece in the healthcare space. Jodie herself is a senior executive with deep healthcare experience. She's a CPA with an enviable commercial background. She's an expert in digital health and organisational design and has led major initiatives for some of Australia and New Zealand's largest healthcare organisations. And finally, she's very passionate about equality and social impact. Welcome, Jodie.
Thank you, David.
Thanks for joining. So this series aims to tap into the expertise of industry leaders and in an effort to uplift innovation capability within complex organisations. What I'm hoping through targeted questions and some insightful casual conversations is really trying to equip leaders with the tools to transform ideas into outcomes more effectively, efficiently, and affordably than any alternative. So we'll dive into some questions and we'll have a bit of a chat, and then we can talk about what you're currently working on.
Sure.
The first thing I want to ask you is, what do you believe are the secrets to effective corporate innovation?
Oh, the secrets. Can't tell you a secret, can I? No, I can. So look, in my view, and having spent a long time in a corporate, in health and having sort of innovation in my remit, and then having worked with others organizations, I have three key things that I think, principles or guidelines that I think really make a difference. And I like to keep everything simple, so I call it ABC. So it's really, it's align, build, and commit. Alignment is really about that. Alignment has to start from the top, from the board, through to the executive, and people have got to have, an agreement, at least on, they might not necessarily agree on the details, but they need to be aligned on the way that that the organisation is going to approach innovation, how that innovation strategy fits in with their overarching organisational strategy, what sort of change, what sort of funding. So align on the sort of the big rocks is really important, because if you don't do that, things then, when they get down to sort of the next layers, become a bit of a hierarchical mess, and infighting occurs, and it's not.
We've all been there.
Indeed, yep. Indeed. So I think your A for align, B is for build. Now, build is building momentum. It's building. It's starting small, right? Building with a lighthouse project, if you like, something that's going to get you a little bit of credibility. What is one of the biggest pain points that the organisational people have, and almost start there and try and solve that with some innovation, whether that's external or internally focused. Getting a prototype, or working through it so people can understand the methodology. And then you build some skills along the way, right? You're not just telling people this is how you innovate. You start to get people involved. You end up with a bit of the fishbowl type approach, where people start to look in and go, oh, that looks interesting. I might want to get involved in that, as opposed to a lot of the resistance that you can tend to get through the middle layers. And C for commit. Now, this is, I always use the sort of analogy of kind of, the billy goats, and they kind of they see the green grass on the other side, and they get halfway across the bridge, but it gets too hard, right? And they turn around and go, actually, it's a bit easier over there. So off they go back again.
Yep.
It's that your idea might not necessarily be the right one, but you've got to stay committed to the opportunities of innovation, because a portfolio approach will usually be the best way, because you'll have some wins and losses. But the commitment also is about measuring success, and that's not necessarily expecting the hockey stick style return that you would get in a more established piece of work. But it's really about saying, well, what are we measuring? What are the right things? Looking at experiments and hypotheses and A/B testing and those kind of things around participation, that's giving you little signals, right, that you're heading in the right direction. And if you're not heading in the right direction, that's okay. But when do you change or pivot? and when do you stop, right? I've seen so many things that were good ideas just left to rot on the vine because people move on to the next thing without necessarily pruning what's behind. And I think they are really important to say, well, what do we want to scale? Because whilst it's, especially in healthcare, you know, most have heard Mark Butler say in healthcare that Australian healthcare has more pilots than Qantas, and it really is true because there are pilots everywhere. But unless we're using the learnings and then deciding what is it that we want to scale, we can't enact proper transformational change. So that's a long way of saying ABC.
I love it. Three great secrets there, and I love the sequencing. I've got my secrets is letter 3 is triple P as well. So I think I can see there just as you were speaking. I found exactly. I found myself just nodding and nodding. I'm like, yes, all of this aligns. I know why we get on. I think what was really interesting there, just there was a lot of there that resonated. One thing in particular that you mentioned was around starting small, and I think certainly I've been there, I've done it, I've seen it 1,000 times. Is you go big too early, inevitably that draws lots of resources, lots of time, lots of interest, and things don't go to plan, and there's this huge expectation, and the bubble bursts. And the book I've just finished reading, actually, a very good book called Pirates in the Navy, which is about exactly that, around innovating in the Navy and being a pirate, so kind of running in a different direction and doing things a little bit differently. Talks about exactly that as one of the fundamental principles of corporate innovation. So you know, certainly support for what you're saying. Maybe using that kind of framework or that lens of ABC, I wonder if you can give an example of ineffective innovation at work. So what were the driving forces and what was the outcome where you've seen something just go poorly and you've just been like,
yeah, I've seen it from afar and I've seen it from being right in the middle of it. Look, it's really not, I think the first thing is you've got to actually identify that it is innovation that you're doing. And some people are like, oh, it doesn't matter what you call it. Well, no, it doesn't, but it matters how you treat it. You know, it doesn't matter whether you call it bananas or apples, but it does matter on the level of risk and uncertainty, ambiguity that's associated with innovation. So if you give somebody a project and you say, well, off you go, and people go on hire teams, right? They get a project manager, they get a BA, they get all of the things that a project team traditionally has. And then they go, right, let's get our scope down, right? Let's get our milestones, get our Gantt chart. And then everybody's kind of looking around in the room and going, oh, and there a lot of spinning happens because you aren't there yet, right? You will get there, right? But it is a different practice that you need. It is starting with more sort of human-centered design principles of discovery, of define before you get to your development and deliver. But so I think that's one. There is, I actually have a guide of the 8 common mistakes I'm happy to share with you as well that people make. And I mean, some of the others that I've seen certainly are asking BAU people to do it, like business as usual teams. Business as usual teams, very important to be a part of, but not to try and drive it, because usually they are focused on what is their KPI, right? They're being measured on something, which is usually, if they're in an established business, faster, leaner, you know, more, that is more than last year. Whereas innovation won't be more than last year because there is so much uncertainty to it. So I think the way that we measure it, I mentioned earlier, needs to be different. The way we govern it needs to be different. The amount of times I've been at a quarterly planning session and I've seen innovation continuing to be dropped off the bottom of the board because all of the resources are constrained because of other projects. So you can't push something through if it is just an adjunct to your business as usual activities. It's got to be different.
Yeah, definitely. Very aligned there on the people in particular is, and the execution. I think it very often leaders get caught up in execution is just doing this new idea, and inevitably I think that leads to those other things. You're like, okay, well, we've got people in house who can deliver because they've done it before, and you kind of ignore this whole part that's around what's the problem we're trying to solve? How is this thing going to generate a profit or revenue? Do we have assets and capabilities that give us a competitive advantage, whatever? And then so you bring these people in who are just executioners, maybe not necessarily most capable for that way of thinking, which is a completely different mindset. And then inevitably it ends up just kind of blowing out and turning into another project. And there was no actual innovation along the whole journey, which is really
it's oranges and apples. And then people say, oh no, we tried innovation once, it didn't work.
Yeah. Heard that one before. Very good. Thank you. So then maybe that let's talk about timeline blowouts and slow innovation, because I know one thing that we're equally passionate about is, and one of the benefits of using consultants is externalization of thought, but also it's kind of focus, which can help you move faster. Have you got an example, and maybe you can just give a time or a kind of a hand scale in terms of what's the biggest time blowout you've seen on an innovation project, initiative, opportunity, pursuit?
It's interesting. Look, I've seen a lot. They tend to mainly be system-based innovations, which has partly been because the innovation has said we need a whole new core system for it to survive, or we need a big chunk of something to be able to do something. So what started off as an innovative idea that could have been done, using a spreadsheet or, some other sort of light tool that could have taken 3 months. I have seen people spend, I saw one that has literally spent about $14 million over this course of 2 years. And then it didn't go anywhere because there wasn't enough tech matchmaking. It was kind of like the system. They were sold this new system. They went out and spent all the resources on that, and then didn't kind of think about, well, what is the goal, and then we'll match the tech to that. So it was a bit of tech leading innovation as opposed to innovation being tech match made. So I'd probably say, that the 14 million was certainly the biggest financial blowout. I personally, years ago, had a $1.5 million budget to try and get some innovation up. But again, because it was being treated a bit business as usual and a bit kind of off the side of the desk, but also without having the dedicated resources, all the things I now know, if I had had that time again, would have done differently. We ended up having to give most of that money back to the board because it was board endorsed. And so I think knowing how to set things up in the beginning can not just save a lot of money, but actually give a lot better results. To your point about the capability is sometimes capacity can be there, but if you don't know how to do it, then you're going to get lost and spin and waste a lot of time and money. And then people say, no, we tried that innovation once, it didn't work.
Yeah, no, of course. So maybe then let's dive into the $14 million blowout as an example. Is if you kind of had your time again and you were, say you're an external consultant to come in on that particular project, what's the advice you would give to the sponsor of that could help them, I guess, be more efficient and make sure that the same mistake doesn't occur? What are those ingredients that you think beyond the ABC, or maybe you can go within the ABC?
Yeah.
What are the things that can sort of help leaders innovate more affordably and efficiently?
Build, measure, learn. So don't wait until all your requirements are in, or you try to know everything early. Start. So even if it is a core system rollout, start with what are some early functionality or features that you can get out there in the hands of your people to start testing to see what's there. I think that some people still think, oh, well, we need to have one whole thing replaced to do another. Or we need to have a waterfall type program where you know everything at the beginning and then you're just going to deliver it so I can hold people responsible for that plan. That's how leadership went once upon a time. But I think in our digital world and our customer-oriented customer experience revolution is you need to test, you need fast feedback, right? You need to say, are we going the right way? You need to have a North Star that says strategically we want to be off this system, or strategically we want to be in this market, or we want to be in these products. That's okay, but rather than waiting until you know everything, because that never is going to happen, I think it's progress over perfection.
Yeah, I love that. I remember a team I used to lead a number of years ago for a large insurer, and we had similar challenges. We always had these massive pieces of work, and we implemented this system, or a kind of a principle called SAG, which is Small Achievable Goals. And there was a young lady in the team at the time, and she said the easiest analogy she could give was, she said, so are you saying, like, on a Sunday morning, if I wake up and I'm really hungover, like, I need to I know I need to eat breakfast, but I've just got to break that down. I know what the outcome is. I know what my North Star is like, I've got to feed and nourish myself. I need to break it down to small achievable goals to get there. First thing, open my eyes. Second thing, roll over. And a waterfall doesn't necessarily allow for that, because you might find when you roll over, you go, oh, actually, I don't want to get out of this side of bed. I want to get out the other side, because that's where the sun is, or whatever it might be. So I think that kind of small achievable goals.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So maybe then we'll change gears a little bit. If we think about innovation, I guess holistically, what is innovation? What isn't innovation? But can you have an example, or can you provide an example where you have worked either client side or as a consultant, and you've sort of done some research, someone's had this great idea, and you've kind of been given the green light to pursue it, and the best course of action is to do nothing, is where innovation is not the best way to pursue or to kind of move forward. Can you sort of talk us through a scenario where you might have had that?
Yeah. So do you mean that we've not even started? So this is pre.
No, we haven't executed. So I'll give you an example. The business might start with a hypothesis, or a leader might start with a hypothesis. They think it's a really good idea. They've got some market signals. They've got some signals that say this is a good idea. Then they go, let's kick off in an innovation process, and let's validate whether this is a good idea, or let's kind of move into execution. In their head, they're 5 years ahead. It's a $50 million business. It's, got them out of jail. They're the next CEO. They're on a board, whatever they're doing but as you and I know, that's not always the reality. In fact, it's the rarity. Is there a situation where you've actually had to get there and go, do you know what? There are market signals here that suggest that perhaps this is not the best course of action. Perhaps we could look at this, or perhaps this is the best thing, or perhaps we just shouldn't invest in this space for X, Y, Z reasons.
Yes, I certainly have. I think usually I would say they're internal reasons why we haven't, because we've done the research, we know that the signals, we've done discovery, we know what's required. Unless the business can commit, back to my ABC, there's no point. So we could be aligned and we could try and build, but they can't commit because there's so much else going on in the business. They can't commit to doing it right. Like, if you're not going to commit to building a dedicated team for execution, then it's not going to work. So I've seen a business invest, a few months' work quite recently in a piece which I'm sure they could have done, right? They could have generated some early revenue for them, but where they were in terms of another transformational journey, they just weren't ready to move, and that was the right decision for them. I don't think that they could have done that successfully. There are others where from an external point of view, we've done some customer validation and then had to say, this is probably not yet, especially within aged care. I have a lot of clients in and around aged care, and years ago we had a digital tool, it was a tablet that enabled a bit of a concierge service for the elderly to connect to their families, or games, or supports, or bookings. And after we tested it quite a lot, we kind of went, they're not quite there yet. There are some features, but they're just not digitally ready. And even though we'd all like to, people to have their life made easier at that age, in their 80s, they just weren't. So we said, it's not that it's not right, it's just not right now.
I love it. I love the idea. You've great two examples there. One, and completely different, but both valid reasons. One around market readiness, which we do hear a lot of, and I actually I was once given this saying from a leader who said, "No such thing as a bad idea, just bad timing." And I think that holds true when you talk about market readiness. Either the market's just not quite there yet. The other one I thought was really interesting was around business readiness, and you don't often. I would say that's less spoken of. Is the business actually ready to pursue this? So it's a good one. I've never necessarily given that deep thought around when you are pursuing something, and you might have an executive or a leader who is pushing this thing. But also, often we think about change management, but is the business ready to take this on? Is there actually going to be an opportunity to scale? Is there going to be an opportunity to do X, Y, and Z, support it, whatever it may be? Is a really good perspective and lens, I guess, at least that kind of adaptability lens of kind of pursuing new ventures. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah. Look, I think it's part of the alignment piece. If you can't be aligned and get everybody to look each other in the eye, and at least have 80% of the room going, yes, we can commit to doing this as a senior executive leadership team, then it's not right. So often the mistakes I've seen are where one or two people have a very gung-ho and want to do it, and do want to do it for all the right reasons, but the rest of the business isn't so sure. So I think from an exec point of view, you've got to have that alignment.
So I imagine that probably makes you at times unpopular, particularly with the sponsor or whoever's got the idea and wants to fund it and is ready to execute. Speaking of unpopular, I'd love to hear your perspective if you've got any unpopular beliefs that you hold about innovation. So those of us who work in innovation generally speak the same language. We generally reference strategizer and kind of all these things, and we talk about lean, and we talk about human-centered design and agile and desirability, viability, feasibility, adaptability, purpose, strategy, all of these things. I just wonder if there's any unpopular beliefs that you hold that are sort of against the grain, but you have seen have worked for you.
Against the grain. Look, I think I'm not sure it's against the grain in the innovation community, but certainly in the wider community, my view is that you need a dedicated team to execute innovation. That it is not a separate lab, it's a partnership with the business. So you certainly have wherever you have strategic needs for, HR or finance or whatever the supports are that you need within the business, but you need that dedicated freedom. And I've often used the example of climbing K2. Often people get really excited. It's like climbing up to K2, not that I ever have, but you get up there, and it's been a mammoth exercise, right, to get to the top. You've had your business case signed off. You may have gone through some testing and everything, and everyone's ready with this new concept to go. You're standing on top of the mountain, and you're looking around, and you go, well, okay, we're ready to go now, and everyone's high-fiving. But actually, the hardest part of K2 is climbing down the mountain. And climbing down the mountain is like execution innovation, which again is a whole different set of skills than what it may have been for those people who got you to the top. Some of them may align, but some might be different. So often I'll say, well, when we need a dedicated team, people go, no, we can use Paul, and we've got Jimmy and Jenny. They were all great. They can come and do this. We don't need anybody else. You've got to have the right skills. So first of all, identify the skills that you need, identify where you need them, and they're strategically important to have connected to the main business. But otherwise, you do need to bring in some new people to help execute, because I've seen people try to do it internally, or even a lab, because then when you go and have a lab, you kind of get a little bit of that wasn't built here. And then people won't want to, continue it. That happened to me a few times. So yeah, look, I think it's really around that dedicated team that is not always popular when I suggest it.
Yeah, I've been. It's interesting you say that. This has been occupying a lot of my thinking lately, and in my experience, most of my experience has been in a lab of sorts. With various dependencies and connections to core businesses. And I think I'd be interested to sort of discuss this, but I'm a little bit torn at the moment. So I always kind of thought maybe that's the best solution. The problem that I've seen off the back of that is I've seen most of my friends have been made redundant across a number of organizations because the business hasn't had that commitment, right, of going, okay, we're going to see this through to the end. It becomes a discretionary expense. The first things to go are usually marketing and innovation. And because, you don't necessarily often see the direct returns in a traditional commercial sense. So I like what you're saying about it. It's almost like it's not a lab, but it's somewhere in the middle around bringing in new thinking, bringing in new processes and experience and expertise, but then merging that with the kind of the strength that you need from the business, from the core, in terms of capabilities, in terms of ability to kind of break through the sort of the red tape and those sorts of things. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yeah,
somewhere
absolutely. It's a partnership. So you might have some people in the business, for example, that have great customer relationships that would really benefit your new innovation concept. So you might second them out. Doing 2 or 3 days a week usually doesn't work. You second them out for a period. And you want to make it short. Back to your accelerated philosophy, you want to make it a 3 to 6 month, get in there and learn and roll out what you can and keep learning. There is a bit of uncertainty in it. You need to have the right protections in there for people so they know they've got it, back to your redundancy, so they know they've got a job to go back to. But also it gives other people opportunities as well. So you don't bring the same people in an innovation team. You might, because you're starting to build the muscle internally, but you bring in people like you or I, for example, that have innovation expertise, and we can drop in. We might drop in a few days a week. That might all be required, and then pull back out again. But we help people with that innovation. And if you need a subject matter expertise, then, the gig type economy that we live in, sometimes you can get that from Upwork. Sometimes you can get it from, agencies. So it's really understanding what are the skills, how much do you need of it, and for how long. But it is a partnership with the business that has that transparency. It's not a hidden lab. Now, labs certainly have their benefit at times, but the issue with labs that I've seen is trying to bring it back in. It's too disconnected, and trying to do it internally with one innovation team, you're going to need different skills at different times. So having somebody that's, doing an innovation in a digital health is going to be very different from somebody who's doing a new model of care in nursing, right? So you need different skills.
Yeah, love it. Thank you. All right, well, time to talk about, thank you for sharing all your thoughts. I'd love to hear more about Healthcare Innovated and anything else that you're working on at the moment. So maybe you could just tell us and provide a bit of insight about what you do and some sort of great things that you're excited about.
Yeah, look, I get excited about innovation, of course, and healthcare. So my career started in healthcare nearly 20 odd years ago. I spent majority of it with Medibank in many different roles on the healthcare side of the business, doing new models of care, new big contracts with the government. So very much on the health side of things. I did, Medibank at Home. We did Care Complete. We set up disability medical assessments. We did, more hospital substitution activity. So a lot of strategy and innovation in that, and some digital health. I also set up an innovation council and sort of innovation practice at Medibank, and I learned a lot from that, warts and all. And I learned that it can be really, really hard to bring in an innovation capability within an existing corporate business, and bringing in a lot of stakeholders. And I certainly learned, what works and what doesn't. And when I left Medibank, I went and did a postgraduate in innovation and design thinking, and just love the concepts that you can bring to healthcare, which, inertia tends to run quite strong in healthcare for a lot of good reasons. We're not dealing with widgets, we're dealing with people's lives. But there are a lot of conflicting forces in healthcare as well, different players to users, a lot of different providers and interdependencies. So there's a lot of different forces at stake, which mean that it is hard to innovate. But just because it's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. There are so many wicked problems, so much opportunity with AI, digital, that we can use to augment what we do, not replace, but augment. And I think, so I set up 4 years ago, Healthcare Innovated, which is literally that I help healthcare leaders work out how to innovate and how to do it at scale. How do you get in there and start small, build a practice, build a muscle, to move through a lot of the tensions that come up, and try and reduce failure rates, because failure rates are okay if it's a bad idea, or an idea that's not right, as you mentioned, but you don't want it to fail because the process was wrong. So yeah, so I work with digital health. I work in aged care, in hospital substitution. You know, I've worked with some larger providers such as Calvary and Australian Unity and HCF, and I've worked with some smaller ones, Care Connect and Comrade, and I also work with CSIRO and their On Accelerate program. So really innovation strategy and practice, and ensuring that you get the return on all of that.
Wonderful, thank you. And what a very impressive portfolio you've managed to build over just a few years. It's very exciting. So how do leaders, if leaders want to get in touch with Jodie, with Healthcare Innovated, what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, sure. So well, my website is healthcareinnovated.com. My email is jodie.granger@healthcareinnovated.com. Or you can just find me on LinkedIn, which is Jodie Granger, or Healthcare Innovated.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Jodie. Thank you very much for taking your time and sharing your wisdom today. I've certainly got out of it personally. The ABC is going to stick with me forever. So that's great. And look, I'm sure there's lots that leaders can take out from what you've shared today, and uplift their innovation capabilities. So look forward to staying in touch, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, David.